Hello, so happy to be here with you today. I'm Jennifer Barbee, and we're going to be talking about 7 secrets to increase midweek demand during uncertain times. And I'm just going to share my screen with you and we will get started. Again, I'm Jennifer Barbee. I'm co-founder and partner of Destination Innovate. We are a consulting and marketing agency. We've been working with over 400 destinations across the United States. Lots of great wine destinations, including Loudoun County, Napa Valley, Finger Lakes. So hopefully we've got some really good strategies to share with you in this session. And we'll get right into it. The first is trends. And it seems like that's not so much of a secret, but very often when we are really concentrated on what we're doing and how we're going to make the bills and run things forward, especially during the time of COVID and the pandemic, we tend to maybe not look at trends as much and we're just trying to continue to go. So in this first secret, it's think like a destination. You're a destination maybe without hotel room nights, but you're a destination. So some trends that are we just kind of have pulled recently is what's happening with the winery sales and channels pre-COVID and during COVID. And restaurants and tasting room sales made up about 43% of the average winery sales as of April 2020. And then really resilient producers immediately evolved to phone sales, e-commerce, lots of Zoom tastings, curbside pickup, among other tactics. So it's important to look at what your competitors and the rest of your industry is really doing during this time. Some considerations to take into thought when you're thinking about what you're going to do in 2021 and forward is really there's so much pent up demand. You know, the latest traveler sentiment, and when we talk travelers, we're even talking local and road trippers. That pent up demand of just wanting to get out and being with friends and family. You've got to really think about how you're going to deal with that demand with lots of other considerations there. And whether or not you want to open up daily operations or whether you may want daily operations to really be considered by the demand. So maybe putting the marketing out first and then considering whether you're open up midweek or you're going to take another pivot. Tastings by appointment are really, really popular. Small groups only. Obviously, there are restrictions in place, not in just Ohio, but coming from other places outside of Ohio. It may be important to keep a by appointment strategy when it comes to your operations in small groups only. Obviously, socially distant wine tasting is a big thing now. What's your social currency? In other words, what's your peer envy on Instagram? Is it an Instagrammable place? And I'm sure they all really are, but how are you capitalizing and marketing in terms of that social currency you may have? And then I always like to show, these are a couple of screenshots of trends.pinterest.com. You can also use Google Trends, which is google.com/trends, just to see where the demand is going. And a couple of things it shows you from there is like what's big on food and drink. And when we get into the food tip, we'll talk about some of this. But for instance, this week, trending are salmon recipes, simple meals for dinner, healthy snacks. So how can you pair that with your tasting room or getting some midweek demand on what people are really thinking and working on in terms of trends? Also, what's interesting, if you look at the bottom category here, you've had some dip down in wineries and winery weddings, but now it's really starting to shoot back up. Now it's after question popping season. People are looking at how they can have winery weddings. We're going to get into that just a little bit when we talk about those small gatherings, groups, and things like that in terms of that trend. But keeping up with the trends, and it's just as easy as a simple search to see what's going on kind of week to week and what people are really interested in your geographic area and beyond. The second tip is really thinking long-term strategy. It's very easy to say, how do we feel next week, next month, even 3 months from now? But it all needs to start with strategy. You want to plan twice and cut once. So I want you to think long-term strategy, even though we are in some really uncertain times right now. So from a long-term strategy, one of the key secrets to this is think about partners that you may not have ever thought about before. Local organizations like your destination marketing organization. Of course, some are obvious like this one, which is Ohio's Wine Country, but a lot of those other destinations that may be around you, they may be local, they may be county organizations, may have real opportunity to partner with you so that they can also meet their pent up demand and really work to bring travelers back to Ohio. Also, economic development corporations are also a great one to partner with and look at, because your economic development corporations, they're about bringing businesses in. So whether you become part of that tour so that the businesses know that your winery is one that new residents would really enjoy, or whether that's partnering for small elite gatherings, an economic development corporation is also a great one to really try to think about partnering with long term. And then, of course, chambers of commerce are always great. There's also something kind of new that popped up, which is an interesting partner opportunity called Harvest Host. And what it is it's actually luxury RV camping at over 1,500 wineries, breweries, farms, and a lot more. And this is like one of those things that became innovative during our times of COVID. And so this one has really popped up. So I'd look at something like Harvest Host if it's something that your winery can accommodate, and see how that may work to, again, increase that midweek demand, really looking at those days that people aren't just like, hey, it's a Saturday, let's go to a winery. And then you really want to think too, in terms of opportunity, is you want to treat these local residents like travelers. Obviously, it's going to shift a little bit, but currently, in Ohio, you have some restrictions when it comes to where they're coming from, what state they may be coming from outside of Ohio. And so you want to take into consideration really driving some local loyalty. And then the third thing we're going to really look at is our audience. Now we know who our normal, winery patrons are, but I want to encourage you in this secret to think about who you're really talking to. And we do something in marketing called narrative psychology. And really that follows the trend of, it's kind of the story of me. This is why personality quizzes and things like that are so popular on social media, because I want to hear about me and how I fit into your brand before I want to hear about your brand. So what kind of person am I when I visit your winery? What does that make me? What's my social currency there? The first thing you want to really do is audit your email list and your followers. And though email has been a very long digital strategy, it is even more important now to grow that email list, really audit your email list, look at your followers, look at the kind of content you're putting out there, and how does that fit into their story? And again, fit into some of our other secrets here about their pent-up demand. So if you're talking to me and I've been homeschooling children because I've had to for a while, hey, don't you deserve a break with your girlfriends? Don't you deserve a night out with your husband? Again, those are some midweek strategies you can take into consideration from that narrative psychology standpoint. And when you're looking at trends, you want to think about the fact that a search engine tells you what people are thinking, but social media tells you what people are feeling. So when you take those two things into consideration, you can think about your audience and how and who you're talking to. And it's not just people who have a natural interest for wineries. Maybe it's someone who just wants to look at, getaways or date nights or some other strategies we'll get into. But you want to look at those like outside of your normal cluster of what you think your keywords might be. Another is, what's the appetite of your audience for midweek activity? What do they have going on that may prevent them from going out on a midweek, whether that's a day or an evening excursion? How do you make it easy for this audience that you're talking to? There's a lot going on for us, even if we're working from home or if we have a lot going on. What is that appetite for midweek activity, and how does your winery and how do you fit into that midweek? And then also, the people you're talking to, do you have membership opportunities, or do they subscribe to other places? Do they have subscriptions? Look at what they're consistently spending their dollars on in uncertain times and long-term strategy. And how are you going to talk to them to get them to increase that midweek demand for you? And then number 4, which is probably no real surprise, but I think a lot of us need to just embrace that safety, and not just from a local's perspective, but specifically when travel starts to open back up, which will most likely be later in 2021, safety is going to be here to stay. And one of the top things that travelers want to know from the latest traveler sentiment is it safe for me to go to this place? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be able to follow the guidelines to make others safe around me. So what is your pledge to your customers? If you do social distancing or you have that open in your tasting rooms or outdoor, you want to clearly talk about that and make sure you continue that safe message. Are you providing, let's say, when they come in and they're buying a certain ticket or place to come in, are you providing something like branded face masks? Those are super popular and really inexpensive to add on to your safety practices. And it's something they take with them. And then they go, about their business to the grocery store or wherever, and they have your brand right on their face. So branded face masks are a great way to include in your safety practices to your customers. How are you sanitizing? That's something most people definitely want to know, whether it's inside, outside. Those things have changed a lot. So sanitization, just like restaurants. So I'd really follow, and some of you are winery and restaurant, so you probably know a little bit about this, but the sanitization guidelines are really important. And then what's your pledge on gatherings? Like a lot of people are having to have very small gatherings. Can you and are you in your safety pledge offering a virtual component for guests? So let's say I'm doing an anniversary, I want to do a small anniversary gathering at your winery, but I only want to take the people in my household. However, I want my friends and family to be able to experience this with me. So do we have an option to maybe ship them wine flights so they can gather along? Do you have the technology and the capability to allow them to be part of that virtual component of a gathering that you're hosting in your winery? So those are all safety considerations and opportunities really for you to even further continue that demand. And then the fifth one is think about the workforce. I want you to think about business to business from this perspective. A lot of people are still working at home. Some are going to the office part-time. How does your winery play into maybe offering a B2B component? So I like to call this where the wine and Wi-Fi is. And of course, we want to think about things like being Instagram worthy, talking about the social currency again. Can we work from the winery by reservation and block this out with work-friendly beverages? Like obviously, I don't think the corporations would be too happy about their employees going to work from a winery and maybe being boozy all day, but are there some work-friendly beverages you can provide in that option of that package of booking? Some types of snacks. Could you do some corporate midweek hangouts, either socially distanced by people who are local to get together with their colleagues they may not have seen a lot? Or can you do something like a typical Wine Down Wednesday where one employee comes to the winery and hosts a virtual happy hour? Again, maybe that's an education piece that they could host from your winery that gives them a little experience. It gives the virtual people a little experience, but also some midweek corporate hangouts with maybe just the 4 or 5 of the executive team where they can book that as a small gathering. And then also think about the fact that we have pent up demand, but we aren't completely open. So also be a branded resource. What kind of planning resources can you give to meeting planners, corporate planners, wedding planners? Really think about these resources that you can give for planners. And maybe it's some wine education or why being educated on wine advances your career. And here's like a quick thing that you can know about the types of wine. And I know a lot of you are probably doing this in your wineries already, but the more things that you can give that are shareable increases your brand, will naturally increase your midweek opportunities as long as those opportunities are in line, but also just continue to have you in consideration for when all the pent-up demand really does open up. You don't have any worries about booking whatever it is that your destination winery wants to offer. So number 6, we're going to break out in a few categories. And again, a lot of you may already have some restaurants within your winery, but I want to think a little out of the box here. And I really hate that term, but it's such an in the box term to use. But from a restaurant perspective, let's say you do have a restaurant. What other local restaurants can you partner with to maybe make a little spice up or a little fun there? So come for the yum, stay for the experience. What types of food themes could you work out? And not necessarily a midweek one, but one I've seen that I really like is some wineries have what they call food truck Fridays. So they have maybe 1 or 2 come out, or they switch them out with the food themes, and they have the winery experience and they also have the food truck experience. You may want to consider maybe 1 or 2 midweek walks where there's a few like pop-up tents of other local restaurants and culinary that can provide and enhance that winery experience. And then also, what do your catering partners look like for small gatherings? This is when you can get creative, get unique, especially if you're looking at small gatherings during the weekday. What kind of incentive there can you offer, and what types of incentive can your catering partners offer? Because midweek is always an issue for the service industry. So 6.1 would be shopping. So food is always on the top when you talk about, pairing wine and what the wine pairings may be like. But also a shopping experience can be one that's really good for a midweek demand. So we're going to call this sip and shop. There's a few ideas here that you might want to think about. Obviously, you saw with the Pinterest trends, excuse me, there is a huge uptick in winery weddings. So why not host a wedding show? Again, maybe a very limited amount of people that can come in person to the wedding show, but then also sell the virtual tickets as long as you're set up from a technology standpoint. You can do a wedding show. You can bring boutiques in for an in-person sip and shop and block those by times of day. I know we just did a great food and wine walk with a client out in Dallas, and we just blocked a certain amount of capacity for social and safe distancing, but then they came within their allotted appointment time. So we kept it real busy as far as you can be busy during these times, but allowed them to sip and shop, which is a great way to really support your local businesses. And again, I think local from a traveler perspective, from a destination perspective, just from an overall brand perspective, loving your community and staying as local as possible to give back to that community really does pay dividends. Then also you might want to think about a local art show or local artisans. And don't forget your holiday opportunities where you can do some sip and shop that's holiday themed. And even think about holidays that don't normally have shopping, not just a Christmas holiday, but maybe you do something kind of really fun and different to isolate yourself from others, to really differentiate yourself. Maybe it's a St. Patrick's Day swag and sip. Like that's just kind of something that doesn't normally happen. So you want to get real creative when you talk about, sipping or shopping or any of those theme pieces. And then also I want you to think about the fact that especially if we've been home, we also have other responsibilities at home. We may have children, we may be fur parents or have new puppies. A lot of people got new pets during COVID. So think about the options for those, who have other obligations at home. So accommodating pets and kids. I'm sure most of you know this non-alcoholic dog wine has kind of taken off with Dom Perignon and lots of other kind of fun ways to do that. So think about maybe a wolf and wine for those pet-friendly wineries. Maybe partner with day camps or daycares to have some sort of off tasting room activity for children so that parents can really enjoy themselves. Again, catering to a midweek, like, break it up in the middle of the week. A Wednesday, you deserve a night out. Let the kids do this activity. Maybe it's a movie on the lawn type situation. And then the parents can enjoy, the full tasting or winery experience. And then number 7, a few bonus ideas before I get into some other best practices in terms of marketing is kind of hit on these, but think about your theme nights again in the midweek. Are you going to have a roaring 20s where people all dress up and you have all the accoutrements of what it would be like in the 20s in a winery? Maybe it's something kind of funky like rosé and ribs. Think about how you can play on those words. Alliterations always work really well when you're going to do theme nights or midweek pieces. You might want to do a Mardi Gras or other themes where people can feel like they're getting out of their house. They can dress up, again, with limited capacity. Like, what can I experience? And if you have a limited capacity, remember, you can kind of sell this on a premium. So you can charge a little more than you would normally. But also make sure that when you do that, there's a real value in it. You're not just charging more because you can. The second one is film commissions. It's a great opportunity to work with a film commission or where people are filming, especially even if it's commercials or some midweek pieces, they need great backgrounds. So maybe think about working with your local film commission are other advertising agencies who may be filming commercials and those sort of things. And then think about maybe streaming your story. More now than ever, people are connecting with businesses, destinations, retailers, shopping, wineries about hearing your own story. We want to hear why you started this winery. What is it about you, your staff? Think about emerging platforms and telling those little pieces of stories. Like maybe it's your sommelier who talks about how they can't wait until everybody can come back because here's their passion for this winery. And by the way, here's a tip. Here's my favorite wine. And here's some tips to know about it. So putting that narrative psychology then back into your own story is a great way to think about connecting your potential audience and your current loyal customers even stronger to your brand. And in this, you want to try some emerging platforms. So it may be a TikTok, it may be Stereo, it might be Loom. There's some emerging platforms where you can tell stories and you're not so crowded and overloaded. My fourth is really Pinterest in this section of ideas. Pinterest is incredibly undervalued media. If you're doing advertising, if you're doing promoted pins, or even if you're doing organic, Pinterest is where we dream. Pinterest is that non-charged social media platform where it's more about dreaming and less about that back and forth conversation. So Pinterest is really one of those winning strategies in this category of extra ideas that kind of waterfall back to all the other ideas. And then really leverage micro trends. You want to kind of look at, what's going on from a day-to-day basis and look at what's trending. And again, the Trends.Pinterest is a great way to do that. Even if you don't use that Pinterest platform, it lets you know what people are thinking from small things. And that could be anything from a fashion trend, going back to our small gatherings. Maybe that's a fashion show. What's that new trend, or what are the greatest sneakers to sip in? Things like that. Those small micro trends are also really, really important to think about. So you are part of life's moments. Travel, destinations, wineries, memories are so necessary to how we feel. Coming out of 2020 and looking at 2021 really being a little bit of pushing into the same. It's going to be a while before we're back to normal. So with that pent up demand, here's some opportunities for you to really work on your long-term strategy. Mastering your message. And before it was a little easy, like here's who we are, this is a winery. But what is the core desire of the customer? Why your winery versus another? Is it because it's a sophisticated palate? It's a very high-end experience, or am I into a more rustic, laid-back type of experience? What's that narrative psychology and the desire of the customer? And then you can retweak your message. Then you're going to really get into your planning. It's so important to have a good plan here. With your plan, you're going to do it very simply. You're going to have 3 main goals, and they don't need to be they need to be measurable, but they don't all have to be monetary goals, because a lot of those goals will serve back to your monetary pieces. Once you have those goals down, with each one of those goals, you're going to look at your 6-month milestones. Where do you need to be? Under each one of those 6-month milestones, you're going to really isolate 5 action steps and then give it some time. By when is this going to happen? Going back to finding your tribe, you have some general tribe information that we kind of talked about with audiences, but you're going to talk about your general and target message. And I know there's another session going on about, Gen Zs and millennials, and those are great to know about emerging times, but then you have other, interest-based and not always age-based. So what is your general and your target message for each one of those tribes? What is the problem they have? Are they overworked? Are they not able to get out? Or what kind of dream do you solve? I'd love to have, a winery wedding, or I'd love to be able to have this great corporate retreat and lead my company in this discussion. What is it that you can fulfill? What's the culture that you own? Now, there's some obvious to that in terms of the culture, but what ancillary culture pieces? Is it, again, sophisticated? Is it rustic? Is it hip? Is it fun? Is it frivolous? What kind of culture piece do you really own in this? And again, this can be done short term. This plan can be a short term through uncertain time plans, and maybe you pivot back to your traditional brand afterwards, but this is a great exercise to go through. Where does your tribe live? And so is that going to be local? Is that plus 50 miles? Are you going to plan a little further down the line for when travel really opens up? Where do they live both physically, but where they also live in their habits? Are they Facebook users? Are they Instagrammers? Are they TikTokers? Where are they Pinterest users? Where do they actually live? And when they live there, what kind of interaction and what do they do? And then, of course, how you're going to collaborate. So this is going to go back to our partners. What are the new and different collaborations that you can make that will benefit you, not just in the short term, but in the long term? Collaboration is really a great opportunity that's been brought to us through all of this uncertainty. And then how are you going to multiply your impact and your sales? So is this going to be, if you're doing midweek demand, you're doing theme nights? Is this every week? Is this every other week? Is this once a month? How do you multiply that impact and operationalize your marketing? What does it look like for your breakthrough? Where were you in this time? And what's that breakthrough look like? Is that tipping back a certain percentage to being able to, really host and open up your daily operations? Does the breakthrough look like more e-commerce and curbside pickup that maybe you haven't completely capitalized on yet? And then how do you stay in action? Because it's real easy, especially if this becomes successful and these strategies are successful, it's very easy to say, oh, we're really busy, so we don't come back to our plan or we don't come back to our marketing. So having an accountability buddy or an accountability consultant or staying in action is really important to completely fulfill and not really get in the situation again. Like, what happens if we go through this year and we start to open up again and then we have brand new problems or we start to completely shut down? What does that mitigation strategy look like? So staying in action, even if that's virtually dreaming and pending up demand again, will continue to really alleviate those problems that we didn't even anticipate having in 2020. And then just some best practices wrap up for you here. Always strategy first. I think people really confuse strategy and action. So you really want to look at strategy first. Look at your market opportunity through an exercise. What's your competition doing? What are others doing all the way across the country? What's happening locally? What are some of the micro trends that are happening in your local environment? And then you want to really think from a best practices standpoint. A lot of people mistake marketing and advertising. And those are two very, very different mindsets with your strategy and your action. So really marketing and branding is about desirability. It's about what happens in the head. And then advertising is really going to be what you reserve for that last part of the conversion. And I hate the word funnel that a lot of my contemporaries use, but your advertising, let's say you set an event, you're going to really kind of wrap the desire for that event up in the marketing. And then your advertising will be specific to the booking of that event or the conversion of that event. And you want to really think platform direct, be cognizant of not going to, ad agencies or marketing agencies that have opaque pricing, because the cost of advertising, especially through the social media platforms, is very undervalued. So it's very inexpensive to do right now. So make sure your advertising really has a strong ROI thought about it. Again, developing new relationships, definitely a best practice. Get super creative, especially with kind of the pop culture words. Regardless of the age, it tends to bode really well to go along with pop culture and get real creative with, especially events do best with alliterations like wolf and wine. You want to think about alliterations and get super creative with how you're putting your marketing out there. And prepare for demand. Like, you may have more people that want to come that don't. And how do you deal with the people who can't come into whatever that midweek gathering or event or opportunity might be? How do you book them for later? How do you do that from a customer service standpoint? Because you want to keep those reviews very, very high, but also you want to prepare for pivoting. Like, what if there's a new shutdown, or what if there's some other challenges that keep people from thinking about, visiting your winery or being a patron of yours? So those are really kind of the best practice wrap ups. We had 7 main tips, 6 went for 3 tips. Hope that was very informative for you. And if you have any questions, I know we'll do a Q&A live, but if you have any questions, anyone is welcome to email me directly, jbarbee@destinationinnovate.com. And I hope you all guys have a great rest of your day and enjoy the conference.